In this lesson, we'll continue with our previous file and explore how to drill these holes right here. So the first thing we're going to do is use a drill to drill all the way through these holes to the bottom. So on my Toolpaths tab, in the gallery here under hole making, I'm going to choose drill. And using the prompt, we have the option here to Control-click to select all matching radius solid features. So I'm going to hold down the Control key and select that hole. And notice what it does is it selects both of them because they both have the same radius, which is exactly what we wanted. And it is actually a smart practice to make sure you didn't select any other holes that you didn't realize had the same radius. I click OK. And now on our Toolpaths type, we're going to make sure that drill is selected, and we'll go to the Tool section and we'll choose a 5/8 inch drill. We'll comment drill holes. Now under stock, this is a very powerful setting here. What we do here is if we tell it to use stock, it's going to look at the stock model. And specifically, I'm going to tell it, look at the stock model that's called 2-After Pocket. That's this one here that we just created at the end of the last lesson. And I'm going to use this stock definition for both where to feed to and how deep to go down. So it doesn't matter that the hole starts down here. It's going to see all the stock above it, and it's going to respect that and actually drill through that stock, as opposed to rapiding down. Or even worse, once it's done with this hole, instead of just rapiding up just to make clearance out of the hole and then move over, it's going to pull all the way up out of the stock and then over and back down. So under cut parameters, we'll choose a chip break, and for the dwell, we'll make it 100 thousandths. Now under the linking parameters, notice that this is all grayed out. It's all grayed out because the depth values are incremental relative to the actual solid definition of the hole. And to show this, if I was to go back into stock and turn this off, under linking parameters, I have full control of this, just like traditional drilling. I can tell it how deep to go, and I can tell it where to retract to, and so forth. But since we have stock enabled here, and I'm going to respect both the feed position and the depth, under linking parameters here, these are now grayed out. So you can see it says calculate incremental values based on holes and lines. So not only is it going to see the depth, and in some cases the diameter, but it's also going to see where the stock is. And last but not least, under tip compensation, let's break through the bottom by a little bit. And the reason is, and we're going to minimize this for a second, the reason is, because as you can see, we have clearance below this where we're not going to hit anything like a fixture. So I'm going to hit escape to bring our menu back up, and let's click OK. So as you can see, our drill starts above the stock. So instead of coming right down to where the hole starts, it's going to start pecking from up top all the way down to the bottom. With a little bit of a breakthrough. It's going to retract all the way up to the top. And this is another benefit of using that stock as an option, because it knows it has to pull out and clear the stock before it can wrap it over and then start drilling again. So let's do the same thing now, but we'll focus on a circle mill so we can machine out these circular areas up top. So in the gallery, we're going to choose circle mill. And again, I'm going to hold down the control key and select this circular entity. It identifies both of them. And since I'm in circle mill, you'll notice that when I select on tool, we don't have a flat end mill here that's going to be suitable. So let's go and select one. And I'm going to navigate to my mill inch library in order to pick a tool from that library. And I'll just choose a 3/8 inch flat end mill. So this will be called circle mill. And under the stock, we're going to use the stock as well, but we're not going to use the stock to define the depth, because that'll create a circle mill toolpath that goes all the way down to the bottom of the stock. We're going to use the definition of the hole here, including the depth of the hole, to define the depth, but we are going to use a stock definition to define the feed. Under cut parameters, you notice that it identifies the diameter of the circle, and that's because we selected the solid feature here, which has an arc to it, and subsequently a diameter. For the walls and floors, we'll put down 0. And we will turn on roughing, and we'll turn on finishing. And you have to be a little careful because, for example, with roughing, you have a minimum and a maximum arc radius. If these values don't fit, you might not be able to arc into the hole. So just keep that in mind that you might have to adjust these based on your geometry. In this case, I'm not going to worry about depth cuts, but under linking parameters, since we're calculating the incremental values from the holes in the lines, again, we're going to focus on keeping this depth set to incremental right here at 0. So let's click OK, and we can explore the result. And as you can see, the tool starts ramping in from above the part, working its way down to the final depth, and then it works its way out. And again, just like that drilling operation, retracts all the way up, rapids over, and then works its way back down. So now that we have a drilling operation here and a circle mill operation, let's create another stock model that represents the stock after those two operations. So I go to stock model. You can see that we have 1, which is after facing, and 2, which is after pocket. So this one we'll call 3 after drilling. In the initial stock shape is going to be the second one. And under source operations, we're going to make sure chip break and circle mill are chosen. So now we have our stock model after facing, our stock model after the pocket, and then finally this last stock model, which are these two holes. And of course, in reality, we might have actually roughed a lot of this out first before we drilled it. So in other words, all this stock here we could have cleaned away. But this is a good example of why we might want to use that stock option, because it recognizes the existing stock there. We wouldn't have to necessarily do that if we already roughed this out. In the next lesson, we're going to look at OptiRough as an efficient way of removing most of this material, including the material around the sides, and we'll see how we can avoid some of the material in the middle.